Hi everyone, my name's Ben and I'm an indie game developer currently working on a management game called Lumbermill. I've taken a short break from that project this week though to see what I can create in 5 days with Core, a free new game development platform built on the Unreal Engine, with tools to build, design, publish and play games. This video will show the entire process of developing a game from start to finish. I'll be going it alone and starting from scratch, though you can use one of the pre-made frameworks to skip some of the setup. Core have sponsored this video, so for the sake of avoiding bias, I won't be reviewing the platform, just putting it to use to create something you can play. There are loads of games to try out and you can edit and explore everything you see in this video and make a game yourself by downloading Core at the link in the description. So let's get into it. I started by scrolling through the assets available to see if anything sparked some inspiration. There are loads of these, sounds, materials, models, all bases are covered. I clearly didn't have the patience to get through them all, but I knew I wanted to create either a sci-fi or tropical setting. I signed up for the Core Global Game Jam to really narrow down my options with a theme. Eager for the theme to be revealed, I waited and waited. Barely a minute of impatience passed before I jumped onto the Core Discord to check I wasn't just being dumb and looking at the wrong place, and a few minutes later, the theme was revealed as Recover. I got straight into my usual routine of mind mapping to get a concept planned. Sticking with the tropical idea, I liked the concept of building a paradise and creating a quest around recovering a pirate's lost treasure. So I went with that, started doing some research, looking at Black Flag, Sea of Thieves and Uncharted for inspiration. Based on that, I sketched out a plan for the setting alongside my mind map, including a dock, pirate camp, rope bridge, waterfalls, and of course a treasure cache hidden somewhere secret. Once I was happy with the layout and gameplay outline, I created a new project and began by generating some basic terrain. I started with hilly terrain, but ultimately decided to go with an entirely flat starting world so I could sculpt the terrain to be exactly what I need. I started by roughly sculpting the coastline and smoothing it out. Next, I added a plane which will act as the water. I gave it a basic water material to start off with. I'll be adjusting this material later on to look more tropical, but this will do for now. And just like that, I already had a very basic explorable world. Only problems were the beaches were practically cliffs, and you could run on the ocean, just like Sea of Thieves. The running on water problem was easy to solve. I turned off collisions for the water plane, before going back to smooth the beaches out a little bit more to make them slope a bit more gently. Going back into the game, I was a lot happier with the terrain, so it was time to begin some proper landscaping. I sculpted out some basic hills to act as a boundary before creating tiers for the waterfall to cascade down. Games I've made in the past have typically been 2D, so I'd not really used terrain tools like this before. With a bit of patience though, I did find myself getting used to them after a while. So, happy with the general layout, it was time to set up some materials to start painting the terrain. I added grass and sand to the brush so they can blend with each other and got to work painting out all the different areas. Thankfully, Core has a waterfall asset which was super easy to set up and fit to the terrain. Again, just the default look for the waterfalls here. I'll be messing with that later on to get it looking nice and tropical. At that point, the level looked like this. Empty and bland, but already way better than the flat terrain we started with, and only a few hours in at this point. So, time to start adding some detail to the world. I began each area by decorating the cliff faces for that area with some rocks. There are 8 rock shapes to choose from, but these can go a long way with different scaling and rotation applied to each, and intersecting different shapes to create new ones. This is definitely a different approach to model creation to engines such as Unity, where you can import models from modeling software. It certainly simplifies the process for those that would rather not faff about with modeling software, while still having plenty of flexibility. With that in mind, it was time to create a model of my own. Some other Core users before me had created palm trees which were on offer to download, but I decided to create my own for this game. Using a dragon scale material, I eventually hacked myself a texture that looked surprisingly close to an actual palm. I then used a green fern for the young upper fronds and smaller rust-coloured fern for the old lower fronds. A couple of spheres with a darkened burlap sack texture made some coconuts. I was pretty sick of the murky ocean at that point, so I decided to mess with the sea material to create something a bit more vibrant and tropical. So it was time to actually start populating the world with some details. first I decided to create was the simplest area in the game. A beach camp with an old rug or towel on the sand next to an unlit campfire. This is where the player will find a key. I found quite a nice key object someone else had created and yoinked it straight into my project. At that point I realized just how ridiculously large the area was that I'd created. It was going to take me closer to 5 months to finish the level design, so I cut down the size of the beach area, making it quicker to traverse and much easier to decorate. It was then time to create a dock, the game's starting area. I just used some cubes, scaled them down to a plank shape, and applied a wood texture and some moss decals for decoration. I was pretty happy with how it looked, but quickly discovered that the planks I deleted were causing some platforming issues. I solved that problem by keeping those planks, but making them invisible instead of straight up deleting them. Next came a simple wooden plank house for the pirate camp, which will be an important part of the quest, and a rope bridge which takes the player over the river and past the waterfall to a spooky shrine area. The bridge itself is detailed with randomized planks, moss, ropes, and gaps, which creates a little bit of a platforming challenge for the player as they cross. Definitely not the horror of the high road level in Crash Bandicoot, but definitely inspired. I had a bit of a dilemma at that point about how to decorate the area near the beach. It needed some kind of unique detail, so I decided to yet again whip out the terrain tools and create a lake. I decorated that with the palm trees I created before, added some mossy rocks to the edges, and dotted about some ferns and bushes to just break up the terrain a little. I then realized for the second time that the area was way too big, so I reduced the space again. I swear this has got to be the last time I have to do that. I then finished off detailing the areas still barren and devoid of plants, such as the pirate camp at the top of the hill, and this is how the island was looking at that point. The player follows a path up from the dock, past the lake, and up to the pirate camp with its cooking cauldron, house, and palm trees overlooking the ocean. I also created the shrine area across the bridge, complete with spooky lighting and fog. You can outline effects like these with boxes or volumes that define the area the lighting should be adjusted in. Simple as that. The final level design detail before moving on to actually implementing some gameplay was to turn off collisions for bushes, for obvious reasons. So, now to actually code some stuff. A lot can be done without code, as there's some pretty solid built-in functionality with Core, but if you want things to happen exactly how you want, you can write Lua code to handle pretty much everything. I started with a trigger object similar to a collider in Unity to register whenever the player is in front of the door to the pirate hut. I created a script to handle those collisions and wrote some basic code to just check the trigger was working correctly. When the console output gave me the confidence I needed in my shaky Lua ability, I coded a door opening interaction. Thankfully that worked without too much of a hassle, and I moved on to creating a key pickup script. When the player has this key, they will then be able to open the door to the hut and see whatever's inside. I then created some UI to display a hint for the player written by the pirate whose treasure you're after. The player sees this when they walk up to the door without the key, giving some hint about where the player would need to explore. I then began work on the shrine puzzle. This is a riddle the player will need to solve, lighting the candles in the correct order to ultimately reach the treasure. I set up a bunch of custom properties which basically hold references to all the objects in the world the code needs access to. With the triggers on the shrines, I can then use that to get the order in which each candle was lit. Based on that, I can then compare the order with a custom property to see if they were lit in the correct order. Here I've just got some console output confirming that, and I'll come back and finish off the puzzle after I decorate the final area of the game, the top waterfall. I went through and decorated this similarly to before. Plenty of palm trees, rocks, ferns, and flowers. There's a secret area here though, which I'll get to in a minute. Once I'd finished the first part, I moved the spawner for the player character up to that area for testing. Needless to say, there were still some problems to fix. Once I had ironed out the dodgy terrain, I went back to finish off the shrine puzzle. The idea here is once the player has correctly lit the shrine candles, a series of rock platforms emerge from the walls surrounding the shrines, which the player then has to traverse to reach the top of the waterfall. After a bit of testing to make sure the platforming offers at least some challenge to the player, I added the rocks to the puzzle script, set up the positions that the rocks need to move between, and wrote some code to animate their movement. Yeah, didn't quite get that right. Let's try again. On second attempt, it was much better, although it was possible to cheat if the player could light the final shrine and jump backwards onto the final platform. I just moved the trigger forward to prevent that from happening, but the actual order in the game is a little different to that anyway, and based on a riddle the player will discover. So, almost finished. It was just time to decorate the treasure cave at the end of the quest. I created piles of coins with a bunch of primitive shapes and a coin material, dotted some treasure chests around and covered the walls in rocks just to make things feel a bit more detailed. I left a hole in the ceiling so that the sun will shine through onto the central treasure chest, hopefully hinting to the player that they can interact with it and creating a focal point for the level. The last thing to add before polishing everything for you to play was to add a boundary to the level. I took a pretty hacky approach to this, but it works, I guess. I just created a load of scaled cubes which I extended high and wide all the way around the explorable area, just to make sure the player can't explore too far into the ocean and go full flat earther, falling off the edge of the world. I left them visible while I tested, just to make sure I could see any problems from ground level, and found one immediately. No way players will ever escape from here. I fixed that, made the perimeter invisible, added a few sound effects to the game such as a waterfall, beach ambience, a rumble for when the rocks emerge from the walls, and a juicy sound effect for when the player discovers the treasure. So, 5 days building a game in Core, and this is what I got done. I've got a tropical cove rich with palm trees and complete with a lake, rope bridge, shrine, treasure cave, waterfalls, and a pirate's house. Core is completely free to use, and every asset I used in the game and much more are available for you to use in your own games. If you'd like to play this game, add your own quests to it, remix, or completely destroy my level if you want a post-apocalyptic paradise, you can do so right now by downloading Core at the link in the description. Needless to say, I genuinely had great fun making this game and video, so I really do highly recommend Core to anyone that wants to try making games, designing levels, or just explore the many worlds already available. I'm working on another small project in Core at the moment alongside Lumbermill, so expect a video on that soon. If you like this and want to see my future videos, including my series producing Lumbermill, a commercial indie game in Unity, do remember to subscribe. My next video will be a Lumbermill devlog. Huge thanks, as always, go to my patrons for helping to make this channel and my projects possible. In particular, I'd like to thank Warner M14, Joshua, Chris Naismith, Sheshpesh, Pet Patrolman, Nova, Gecko, Ojo Marin, Mr. Smith, Hayden, Kleb, Logan, HPR, Mike James, and BD Smith. That's all for this video. Cheers for watching.